Carolina and most of the South have made great strides in race relations over the last 50 years or so. There is still much of our lives that we live apart.
But as you'll see in tonight's Buckley report, two churches in Greensboro have a history that binds them, and they hope if they treat that past with the proper perspective, it can help them find a way to come together again.
If, as we are told, Sunday mornings are the most segregated hours in America,
this is the day the Lord has made.
This represents something seismic.
I think it's a big deal for both our congregations, and I think it's a big deal for Greensboro.
The congregation of St. James wouldn't find much of their shared service on this Sunday with fellow Presbyterians here at First Pres to be foreign.
This same Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead has united us with God and with each other.
But when you learn their history, you find that it is what they share that makes this monumental. When First Presbyterian was founded in 1824, 4 of the 12 members were slaves.
Several of the slaves were from the founding minister. And you think, how is that possible?
More than 40 years later, when the Civil War was over and those slaves were free, they started their own Presbyterian church on what's now a parking lot on Church Street, appropriately enough. And for most of the next 150 years, they lived largely separate faith lives. And then recently, history began nagging at much of the congregation in both of these churches.
What we know is that racism is sin, racism is evil, and that we have been a part of that through our history.
The Presbyterian Church has wonderful confessions, but it's one thing to say something, it's another thing to live it.
And that's what this Sunday is about.
We have been too slow to act.
It's part of what these congregations began in 2015, an ambitious target that started with simple conversations.
We didn't say that we had certain goals, that we're going to do this or we're going to do that. What we are committed to is the journey. And the journey means that how do we reconcile? And first, we've got to build some trusting relationships.
We established a racial task force about 2 years ago with a sort of open-ended question of, we know that race is still a major issue in the United States. What can we in the church do about this?
When one church has 3,000 members, the other about 500, the process in each can be quite different.
I mean, we had some little resistance, but we were like, and Sam was like, hold up, put the brakes on. we got a longer process. Yeah, so for us, it was a little bit easier.
Part of that process is that the proper symbolism can be powerful.
When you walk out of the sanctuary, this is the most prominent place that we could put the plaque.
A plaque that acknowledges and celebrates that 4 of First Presbyterian's founding members were enslaved people. Reverend Moffett got her first look at the plaque when she was with us recently.
It's pretty powerful for me.
So too was what was professed in their shared service.
It was the church's role to do what laws could not do, to change people's hearts.
And to offer our confession of sin for these years of racism and separation of God's people.
Although both of these pastors and their congregations understand that this alone won't heal the racial divisions.
I believe everything begins with one step.
It's long overdue.
They believe it is medicine that begins the process.
I think we can serve as an example for our community.
I think it was the start of a beautiful thing between our two congregations, and we can take what we learned today out into the world and make a difference and help eradicate racism, and we're all in this together.
Buckley, Fox 8 News.
This year marks the 150th anniversary of the St. James Presbyterian Church. Yesterday's service also commemorated that. The only reason the service wasn't held at St. James was the fact the First Presbyterian Church had the larger sanctuary and could hold both congregations.